Hey guys, I was a little lost there for a second, but I'm back now. It's Thursday evening, according to my desktop, it's 5:26, but I don't believe it's 5:26. Um, I think I'm a little fast on my desktop. So anyway, it is after 5 and it's almost 5:30. This is going to be what I've been doing on my evening live sessions. Just reading from my blog, sharing my words, something that I've always wanted to do. You know, I've kept a blog for 20 some years. I share my stuff. I got a pretty steady readership. Um, I share on Facebook, I share on Twitter. Um, I have a Medium page. I share my work on Medium. Buy me coffee. Should post my link to that if anyone would like to buy me coffee. And you know what? I literally will buy myself coffee if anyone does do that. Um, as a matter of fact, after years of drinking instant coffee, I'm considering actually getting a coffee maker. Be the first time in literally decades since I've had one. Um, but it has been interrupting. I put my coffee pot on. I drink instant coffee, 1 cup a day. Um, and usually I like boiling water, hearing it whistle, pouring the coffee. I like the action of the mindful intent of making that 1 cup of coffee. But it's been interrupting with my morning yoga flow, which is becoming my more important yoga session, switching around from where it used to be my later morning session was my more important. Um, I'm making the switch for various reasons, but one of which has to do with just feels better on my back, actually. And I feel more warmed up when I'm doing my burpees, taking my walks, doing my running. Um, and I like getting sort of shifting the focus my yoga even more, just a little bit. And speaking of yoga, I'm going to read some yoga today. Our friend Destiny PhD, Destiny Forever Walks PhD, is here with you here, Destiny. And since you're going to be just for a little bit, let me get right to the reading. This is, I wrote this in February, and it's being a tree. And it has to do with the tree pose, one of my favorite yoga poses, but it took a while to become my favorite. And then I'll explain it a little bit when we're done. Being a tree in balance. I think I get my truest sense of yoga during Tadasana, tree pose, from the first settling my gaze to a fixed point ahead, grounding my legs as a stable root to the floor, and then raising the opposite leg to balance as my arms reach upwards from a prayerful gesture to branch within the sky. I will only succeed through surrender, one-pointed in my concentration, and then final absorption to the pose, being a tree in balance, most truly so. Every aspect of yoga is covered here, even the initial points of our ethical concerns and personal observations. I will not be able to achieve a sense of poise if at any moment I am violent in thought or motion, or if I'm not completely honest with myself as I approach the limits of my balance. Each of the yamas and niyamas are considered in an instant, intuitively, and I move through them all until I reach a place of steadiness and poise, mindful of breath, senses withdrawn from any outer concerns, and then an easy state of concentration. The pose is a success through my surrender, trusting my place of contact with the ground as well as my arms branching in the air. A perfect moment of yoga, steady, comfortable, and at ease, most truly being a tree in balance now. So, that was from back in February. And it's funny because before I hurt my back or re injured my back, I was very much glossing over those poses, tree and mountain, child's pose, and working with those more dramatic postures, the more yogic looking poses. Um, and that was a true mistake because there's no such thing as one pose being more valuable than the other, no matter the appearance. And it's often the ones that we overlook as being less dramatic that have the most impact, and the ones that we need to be doing more often. Um, so again, Tadasana is the tree pose, and we read it again a little more slow, and we'll break it down just a bit. That I think I get my truest sense of yoga during Tadasana, tree pose. From first settling my gaze to a fixed point ahead, grounding my legs as a stable root to the floor, and then raising the opposite leg to balance as my arms reach upwards from a prayerful gesture to branch within the sky. I will only succeed through surrender, one pointed in my concentration, and then final absorption to the pose, being a tree in balance, most truly so. So, this is what I mean by working through the entire path of yoga, that it starts with those ethical points, what we call the yamas and the niyamas, the 5 restraints and the 5 personal observances that people think are there maybe as a filler. But it's those ethical and personal observances that are the true practice of yoga. And it accumulates in our final surrender to the divine, our final surrender to the universe. And that's what happens with tree pose, that it takes concentration. The last 3 limbs of yoga, the last three limbs of yoga are based on concentration, absorption, and then samadhi. Samadhi is when we are truly at one with the divine. We've given away all aspects of the ego and we are simply being. So, as I mentioned here, that I will only succeed through surrender, one pointed in my concentration, and then final absorption in the pose, where I am, as Destiny just says, sound like you're becoming the tree yourself. Great message that you wrote. Thank you. And that is true, that you truly do become your version of a tree. And you can only do that through surrender itself. And then I go on. Destiny says, let me drop back here a little bit. Being a tree, okay, I love trees. You are one of the reasons I decided to read this particular one today. And that she is a tree hugger and tree talker. And they respond. Anyone who's been around trees know that they respond to us. Every aspect of yoga is covered here, even the initial points of our ethical concerns and personal observances. Will only be able to achieve a sense of poise if at any moment I am violent in thought. I will not be able to achieve. If at any moment I am violent in thought or motion, or I'm not completely honest with myself as I approach the limits of my balance. The yamas, the personal restraints, ethical restraints, one of which is ahimsa, being nonviolent. The other one is honesty, not lying to others or to ourselves. And if I am violent in thought, I won't be able to reach that level of poise. I'll be swaying back and forth. My pose itself will be affected if I'm being violent with myself, saying, why can't you do this? You should be able to do this. You did this yesterday. You're not good enough. You're not a true yogi. That's violence committed to myself, and it affects my yoga posture. So that's what I mean when I say that every aspect of yoga is covered in a single pose. If I'm lying to myself, if I say, well, I can't do this today, I'm not good enough today, that I shouldn't even try. To be honest, I would be saying, maybe I'm just afraid. Let me try. Let me at least try. So what I say here is that each of the yamas and niyamas are considered an instant intuitively, and I move through them all until I reach a place of steadiness, poise, mindful of breath, senses withdrawn from any out of concerns. That's the fifth limb of yoga, pratyahara, where we turn our attention inwards. We withdraw from the busyness of the world and we put our attention inwards. And then an easy state of concentration, which is the sixth limb of yoga, concentration. The pose is a success through my surrender, trusting my place of contact with the ground, as well as my arms branching in the air. One of the things, let me finish here for a second. A perfect moment of yoga, steady, comfortable, and at ease. Most truly, being a tree in balance. One of the things I think I most love of trees is the deep-rooted connection in the earth. Deeper than we ever realized before, but we know now. If a tree falls, all the other trees in the forest will send nutrients to the fallen tree, to the roots of that tree, to whatever is in contact with the ground, which is why sometimes you'll see a fallen tree and a tree will grow from the branch and continue. That deep-rooted connection spreads through the entire forest, and it works in the cooperation of the whole, not for any single tree, but for the forest. Truly, there's no individual tree. There is just the forest expressing itself as trees. Destiny says, yes, thanks for the special reading today. You're welcome, my friend. I really did want to read this for you. Do we need permission to do or be who we are? We are unique individuals in our own way. Very true. And yet sometimes we never give ourselves that permission. We deny ourselves our true beingness. We deny ourselves our uniqueness. We try so hard for so long to fit in, and then we eventually realize what a mistake that is. Fortunately for me, although it didn't seem so at the time, I have never fit in anywhere in my entire life. And in not fitting in, here's the paradox. I fit in perfectly. I fit in perfectly as that unique aspect of life itself, of the entire universe, expressing itself as me. It's pretty remarkable to think of, because at the same time, the entire universe is expressing itself as you. And here we are, two aspects of the one universe. How can anyone come to that realization and want to fight with anyone else? There's a Native American saying about trees, no tree would be foolish enough to have branches that would fight among themselves. No tree would be foolish enough to have branches that would fight among themselves, because it would destroy the tree. It's cooperation. Nature cooperates. It might not always appear that way, but look deeper, and it's easier to see that. So what I really love about trees, well, I love everything about trees, but that deep-rooted connection, and yet at the same time, there's a seamless reach into the air, reaching into the sky. It's seamless, because at no point does the tree end and the sky begin. Is there a point that you can say, this ends and this begins? Or do you just see that seamless flow of one thing changing its expression to something else? And when I go and I observe a tree, when Destiny goes and she hugs a tree, we are part of that seamless expression too. At no point does my hand end and the tree begins. At no point does the tree end and my hand begins. It's a seamless expression of one thing simply expressing itself as the appearance of something other. Absolutely amazing. I love the tree pose. It has become That and mountain, and maybe I'll read about mountain pose tomorrow night. These are poses that don't look very dramatic, especially the mountain pose, um, where we are standing. And you can stand with your hands down or in the prayer position, the heart center, or you can stand all the way up, hands interlocked. It doesn't matter what type of mountain you express, just like in the tree pose. You get the basics down, and then become the tree. Become the tree that you are, not the tree that you see in a yoga text, not the tree that you see online yogis mastering. The tree that you are, the mountain that you are. The beautiful thing about yoga is it's your own expression of yoga. Learn the basics because the basics are there to keep us from harming ourselves, and then express the pose through you. This is why Amrit Desi, who I mentioned before, such beautiful yoga because it's intuitive. He had been training for decades when he had a Kundalini awakening, and all of a sudden, Shakti, that creative energy of the universe, started expressing itself through his yoga, and he was doing moves that no one had ever seen before, postures that no one had ever recorded before, a way of moving from one posture to another. Let that be you. Have your own Shakti awakening, your own creative burst, your own Kundalini awakening. It might express itself completely differently. My own Shakti awakening, a little slightly different, was through writing. For a long time, I only wrote when I was inspired, and that could be for a day, it could be for a week, it might be for a month. But inevitably, it dried up, and I would not be inspired, and I couldn't write at all. And I would go months at a time being miserable and depressed that I was a writer who didn't have anything to write about. And then I would read stories of writers, Ernest Hemingway, year-long writing blocks. And of course, they would turn to alcohol and drugs. So it fed into my own addiction to alcohol. Well, this is what I do as an artist. This is what you do. You suffer for your art. When my meditation and my yogic practice deepened, drinking fell out of my life, and I had an epiphany of writing. That inspiration was always and ever present. I didn't need to search or reach for inspiration. I just had to make myself ready for inspiration. I had to be unafraid to sit in silence until words found me, embracing the silence itself, because everything arrives through silence. It's the silence that holds the words. It's the space between notes that makes the song. It's the emptiness of the page that allows us to read. So I sit in silence every morning, and words arrive whenever they do. It's not for me to demand, it's not for me to say now, because it's always now. So I just sit. And when it's time to write, I write. Always inspired. You can look out the window and there's something right now. I can open any book and find a word that sets me off. I can think of what I saw in nature today. I can think of a yoga pose that is giving me trouble, or one that I've embraced, or one that I let go of, and write about that. There's always something. There's always something to paint. There's always something to photograph. There is always something that inspires us. Let's see. Destiny says, check your community page later, Eric. I tagged you in a post about YouTube guidelines and rules. I hope it will be helpful for you. Thank you. I will. And I checked out Amrit Yoga. He was super phenomenal. He is actually, and he's 91 and still teaching. One of the last of those early yoga teachers coming from India in the 50s and 60s. Says he was super phenomenal to watch. I was left in awe of his yoga moves. Absolutely amazing. I have shifted my own practice to more of his intuitive style, focusing on the third eye and the breath, um, and surrendering to each pose, surrendering to the sensations that occur in each pose. So, all right, guys, 20 minutes. I keep these sessions short so that if anyone wants to come by uh, and listen to the reading, they won't get bogged down in all the other stuff. I have a tendency to ramble, which is no surprise to anyone who comes by and visits. Destiny, thank you very much. Always appreciate your input. I'm going to, right now, I'm going to go check the community page, and I will see everyone tomorrow for burpees, and then we'll do another live session in the afternoon. If anyone watches and has any questions, leave them in the comment section. If there's anything that anyone wants to talk about in a live session, let me know. And last comment, if anyone wants to ever go live with me and do a, what do you kids call it? A collab. We can do that. It would be fun. Let me know. Destiny says, thanks so much for reading of your posts on the trees. You're welcome, my friend. And have a great weekend. You too, Destiny. Take care.